There's been a lot of talks recently about how genetically engineered crops can help feed the world and that they can help agriculture in a climate-affected world. But are these promises real or just hype? Well, that's our focus today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I am Ayola Kasim. We know that our world is changing and so is everything in it. That includes what we eat. In many ways, the food we eat today tastes different from how it did about 20 years ago, thanks to changes in technology. And the technology we have today has gone beyond it being applied to only the machineries used in planting. Today, the seeds have also been genetically engineered. According to reports, genetically modified foods will start selling in the country by 2015. The reports further said that field trial had already been conducted on some crops by biotech experts in the country, and the next stage would be to commercialize them. Many have claimed that biotech crops have the potential to make substantial contribution to the 2015 Millennium Development Goal of cutting poverty in half. It has been said that the crops have contributed to food security and sustainability by increasing world crop production valued at $98.2 billion between 1996 and 2011. South Africa is said to have increased its biotech area by a record 0.6 million hectares to reach 2.9 million hectares. Sudan joined South Africa, Burkina Faso and Egypt to bring the total number of African biotech countries commercializing biotech crops to 4.
Nigeria is the only country that is producing cotton right now in Africa that does not have BT cotton. No, we cannot be the last in everything. Burkina Faso has cultivated 183,000 hectares under BT cotton. We are competing with Burkina Faso on the global market. Their cost of production is going down. Their farmers are held there doing cotton, while our farmers continue to apply massive amount of pesticides. No, that's not, it doesn't make any sense. That's why we are going for BT cotton as Nigeria.
So far, advocates of GM and the biotech multinationals have succeeded in convincing a growing number of African leaders that the advantages of GM foods outweigh the disadvantages. However, the nature of GM makes it an expensive endeavor for the farmers as it requires more and more technology to sustain his outputs and strips him of his breeding selection and reproduction traditions.
The genetic development, it just means, taking natural systems. And the example we'll give is in the Tenera oil palm. The Tenera oil palm was developed from two types of local palms. That's the Pusifera and the Dura. Those trees have specific characteristics, especially in their fruit. One of them has a very, very thin fruit mesocarp. Another one has a slightly thicker fruit mesocarp, but it doesn't yield much oil. Now, when you cross-pollinate these two types of palms, you get what they call is the Tenera. So that's just like a development. You're not actually going into manipulation of the DNA of those particular products. The genetic engineering, they take this stuff, they go into the laboratories and they split up aspects of the DNA and they take certain DNA characteristics from here and other DNA characteristics from there, and they come and they join it all together. And it has issues. Even in the place where these things have been developed, they're still using it very, very carefully. And there's some countries in the world that still will not allow it to be used at all, because you get certain cross-pollinations that come out of the genetically engineered crop. If a bee goes into that and it carries it to another crop, you now might get some sort of mutation, and it's a mutation system as opposed to just a development system. And that's why we're saying let's be very, very careful with it. And a lot of this stuff is actually, it's not being driven by the motive of, oh, let's do the best thing for the people. It's just simply been driven by the motive of, hey, where can we make the most profit from? And unfortunately, this is the trap that a lot of us are being caught in with the huge multinational corporate systems, which are just purely motivated by profit only, and we need to be very, very careful not to go down that road, especially when we don't need to go down that road.
The myths of GMOs include that they are higher yielding are more nutritious and require less herbicides and pesticides. Another myth that is often peddled is that they are climate smart and can flourish in adverse weather conditions. Scientists independent from the biotech industry have shown through careful research that GMOs are not higher yielding than natural and conventional varieties.
The issue of organic agriculture sometimes polarizes the world. You know, there are those who say it is the way forward, and others say, look, don't be stupid, it's a luxury for the rich in the developed countries. Yeah. You could not possibly feed the world through organic agriculture. But then, you know, this is one of the issues that for example, UNEP likes to challenge some of these mythologies. We did a survey of many thousand small-scale farmers in Africa who had switched from intensive agriculture to organic or near organic. They had seen their yields go up on average 100%, in parts of East Africa on average 125%. They weren't, as Tristan said, having to buy pesticides anymore. They weren't having to buy fertilizers anymore with all the impacts that go with it. And we got Mark Sutton there if you want to hear about fertilizer, I think you did. And some of it's not rocket science because some of the soils in Africa are quite fragile. They're very thin. So if you're putting organic material back into the soil, mulching and this sort of thing, then basically it acts like a sponge and you can extend your growing season, or you're less vulnerable to kind of shocks if the weather's particularly dry. So these were some of the simple benefits they were getting. And if you go to a country like Uganda, right, they have a deliberate government policy to promote organic agriculture. They've got hundreds of thousands of farmers in the organic sector, and they are making 3 times the price on the international markets for things like pineapples. So, you know, maybe organic can't feed the world, but maybe in some places it can.
I think there's so much hula baloo about biotechnology and GM foods. Look, you carry cell phones, and do you know that there are studies that have actually said that, in fact, from cell phones, you might have some of the waves can actually cause some brain cancer. You go on planes every day, the pilot tells you, relax, we're flying at 45,000 above sea level, sleep and enjoy yourself, and you'll be fine. We're taking risk every single day, but because things are so well regulated, we don't even realize how much risk that you're taking. The same applies with agriculture, you know. Now, when you look at the whole issue of biotechnology is a great thing. We have the Nigerian Center for Agricultural Biotechnology, and they're doing fabulous work. Our research centers are doing fabulous work. Biotechnology is not just about GMOs. You know, being able to increase the nutritional content of food through biotechnology, as I said to you about provitamin A cassava, at orange, there's also what they call orange flesh sweet potato, where it's a sweet potato but with a lot of vitamins, beta-carotene in it. Or maize, high lysine maize that has high protein content, also comes out of biotechnology.
It has been seen that although the crops are often engineered to withstand herbicides produced by the same companies that produce the seeds, the weeds grow to resist the herbicides, and farmers are forced to keep raising the concentration of the herbicides, thus compounding the resulting harm to biodiversity of the areas affected. The ones engineered to keep pests have ended up sometimes killing unintended organisms. Some American farmers are already counting their costs on the impact of the genetically engineered herbicide-tolerant crops.
Most farmers in America have bought in to Monsanto's advertising, and they believe that this is what will keep American agriculture productive. But you know, we haven't seen the yield gains either in soybeans or in corn that we've been promised. And you don't have to take my word for it. The United States Department of Agriculture keeps records of yields in every production year. We used to have a line like this before we got genetically modified plants, and now we have lines that do this, where we have highs and lows, but never
Am I going to go and buy extra expensive seed and then it not perform the way it's supposed to. I'm buying something and I'm getting nothing for it.
Over the years, in the time that we've grown Roundup Ready soybeans, we've seen an increasing reliance on heavier and heavier applications of chemicals. This year was probably our worst experience because a lot of farmers, including us, learned that we weren't going to be able to control a lot of the weeds in our fields with just glyphosate or Roundup alone. And so we were forced to use other chemicals on top of that, and the cost of weed control this year was drastically higher than what we've seen in the past, simply because it's taken more trips over the field, more applications of herbicides to control weeds.
The people out here that are raising questions about the safety, and not just the immediate safety, we're all still walking around, but the long-term effects of glyphosate in the soil. If there's something out here that we don't know about, if there's something out here that's not being told us, if we've been lied to, we need to know this stuff.
There are a lot of health risks that have been associated over time, different forms of cancers, Parkinson's disease, for people who live on these farms, work on the farms, the families. So there are a lot of concerns about that, especially for children. And that has, of course, long-term ramifications, which I think aren't even accounted for many times. The soil suffers, it becomes sort of crispy and burnt sometimes. Of course, the biodiversity of an area is reduced because of this sort of use. And it just destroys rural communities very slowly. But the lack of choice really makes it difficult for a lot of farmers. Consolidation means that you have fewer farmers, fewer families there, and the infrastructure that depends on those businesses doesn't do as well either. So schools close bit by bit because there are just fewer children in the area, in the rural area. All kinds of stores close, and you see people moving to towns to try to make a living.
I don't see things going back. They've run all your small people out of business. No one's going to get in and start a local hardware store. It's going to be tough for a community grocery store to exist. All these small economies of scale are gone, and they're not going to come back. And I don't see a lot of future for it.
When the issue of seed patents first came out, I think, like most farmers, I didn't really understand what the true issues were. And we were anxious to adopt those crops. We thought it was great. But no one really understood or realized exactly the power we were giving up on our own farms by no longer having the choice of whether or not we wanted to use it. Because now really we have little, if any, choice about whether or not we want to use this technology. And as it has turned out, why we have granted more power that was once ours to the hands of a few corporations. And they're exercising that power and becoming very wealthy doing it. When you allow your crops to be patented, when you allow seeds to be patented, and seeds are just grain, so that you lose control of them on your farm, so that you can no longer use them for whatever they're capable of, but only certain things, then you have to adopt the technology. You have to buy the seed from Monsanto or DuPont or whoever, because you have no choice.
Now, once you let the horse out of the barn, you can't get it back in. If a company is going to promote these products in your country, I'd be concerned about letting that in. Just understand that the people that are pushing a certain agenda, they might not have your best interests at heart.
If I had the opportunity to grow non-genetically modified crops again, like we had 10 years or so ago, that's the technology that we would go back to, the old technology, which is no technology at all. The faith in nature and the faith in plant breeders to be able to select plants for their best attributes so that they're the most productive. If I sat down with a European farmer, I'd tell him that if he adopts any genetically modified crops, he is adopting all genetically modified crops. And he is leaving behind any opportunity to grow the old crops ever again. Because once those patents come into your country, everything changes.
Those watching the development are advocating something different in Nigeria. Experts are of the opinion that the federal government should embrace alternative means of cultivation to boost food production in Nigeria and reduce the country's dependence on imported food. Although President Jonathan has yet to sign the biosafety bill into law, cynics have continued to query the rationale behind the country's intention to go into genetic modification of foods when it is blessed with vast lands suitable for conventional farming.
How do you really know if the product is going to be that safe unless you've tested it on human consumption for a nice long period of time? I know people are making a lot of big money from GM because the initial yields can be very, very fast, but it's also a bit of a trap because it can trap people into just having to use that particular seed product. I mean, some of the seeds will only be developed in laboratories, and so you're now trapped into getting seed from a particular laboratory. Sometimes you can't even multiply your own seed. So I think it needs to be looked into very, very, very carefully. And the question that needs to be asked is, hey, do we really need it? This is Nigeria. This is the God-blessed land in the world. This is one of the most blessed places in the world. Why am I saying that? Because our soil is so incredibly fertile, and we have so many different types of watering patterns. We have a fairly steady rain system. We have watering patterns that come from flooded areas that now recede, and you can have dry season farming without doing too much irrigation. So we actually do have the potential to produce a tremendous amount of food with just what God has given us. And now we're finding that when man puts his manipulation into God's perfect system, it quite often backfires. At first it looks good and you're going to get a high yield, you're going to make a lot of money, but quite often it backfires. So the question that people are actually asking is, hey, why do we need that kind of stuff?
Advocates of GM foods nonetheless insist that the adoption of GMO technology remains the best option of boosting food production in Nigeria in line with current global practices.
Every system has to have regulations. The National Assembly passed the biosafety bill. The biosafety bill is in front of the President, waiting Mr. President consideration and hopefully approval. That will allow us to have a regulatory system in place of how you test technologies. And of course, there are certain parts of the world, remember, that always say, oh, GM food is bad, well, look, as I said earlier on the issue of the flood, it's all science. And you have to look at facts, not what everybody actually says. And I think that what is needed is not another country telling Nigeria what Nigeria needs. It's Nigerian scientists, Nigerian people, Nigerian customers and consumers determining what they need. But, if you want to go to Europe, you could take a choice. You could decide to go by donkey, or you could decide to fly by plane. The plane has risks, but so does the donkey, because you could get eaten also by lions on the way. So it's an issue of balancing the risk and benefits all the time, and that's life.
According to Greenpeace, 10 corporations control nearly 70% of the world's seed market. This corporate control of agriculture means farmers have less choice. It says that genetic engineering does not feed the world. That is because 99.5% of farmers around the world do not grow genetically engineered crops. More so, industrial polluting agriculture uses synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals which pollute our water and soils, the very things we need in order to provide healthy food now and in the future. And Greenpeace also claimed that excessive use of synthetic fertilizers in industrial polluting agriculture contributes to climate change. While many might not see the danger of a technology that increases food production, African leaders and scientists are advised to be cautious about wholesale buying into an agricultural scheme that puts the fate of the entire continent and the larger world in the hands of a few mega corporations. Now, no one is saying that we shouldn't have investors in the agri sector. What they are saying is that these investors should be monitored, and most importantly, the health of the people should be put first before profit. Well, that's our program for the day. Thank you for being a part of it. We appreciate hearing from you. Do keep them coming in. Earthfile@channelstv.com is the address. Till next time when we are back with you, from me and the rest of the Earthfile team. Bye for now.